Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is the Minisforum BD770i. It's basically a motherboard that you can buy as is with a built-in Ryzen 7 7745HX mobile processor. It has 8 cores, 16 threads and integrated 610M graphics. Thanks to Minisforum as always for providing this review unit for the video. This is certainly a lot different to their other products, most of which are fully assembled mini PCs. At the time of this video it retails for £389 here in the UK and requires the addition of an M.2 SSD, DDR5 laptop memory as well as a CPU fan. I've added a 1TB Kingston SSD and 32GB of 5200MHz memory to this one, the fastest supported speed, as well as a Noctua NF F12. I may have slightly ruined the otherwise all-black aesthetic. I can picture this being used for all sorts of small form factor builds, whether they rely on the integrated graphics or make use of an additional PCIe graphics card. That is of course the BD770i's biggest selling point in my opinion. It features a PCIe 5.0 slot, so you can add any graphics card you like, and the 7745HX means that the processing power should be there to handle it. Of course, my focus is always more toward entry level and mid-range, so I ended up using a 3060 Ti with this board, not before testing the integrated graphics though. The RDNA 2 610M iGPU features a 2200MHz boost speed and 2 compute units, so it's nothing special, but surprisingly we can still play esports titles and older games just fine. If you want to cram the BD770i in a really tiny case without a discrete GPU, but you like to play a bit of Fortnite, CS2, GTA, just to name a few examples, you can do so with acceptable frame rates. I'll be benchmarking a wider selection of games soon using this same hardware, but my initial impressions are quite positive considering the specs. Of course, the 7745HX is helping out a lot here, and laptops with different or weaker CPUs may put out entirely different numbers. Now for the past couple of weeks I've mostly been using this board with the 3060 Ti. It's a PCIe 4.0 card that's a few years old now, but it's still a solid gaming choice and there are some great used bargains to be had out there. I figured most reviewers would probably use something higher end as well, so I thought it might be interesting to do things a bit differently. We could certainly benefit from a faster GPU, that's for sure, as other videos will demonstrate. But let's test out a few games with this combination and see how it holds up. I'm going to begin with CS2 and talk a little bit about my initial impressions. The first thing that came to my attention was the temperature. This CPU ran between 80 and 90 degrees in certain games, even with the Noctua fan installed. I reached out to Minisforum, who always seemed to be very helpful to be honest, and they assured me that this was fine. I mean, this CPU is primarily used in laptops where it may hit even higher temperatures on a far more regular basis. I think I just panicked a little bit because I'm usually using a traditional desktop system with a cooler the size of my head. Anyway, the games. Cyberpunk 2077 seems to run a lot better than I remember, to be honest, on the 3060 Ti, but as you can see the Ryzen 7 within the BD770i here is holding up very nicely. The CPU temperature is sitting at the low 80s and we're using just over 70 watts of power now, which I think is very impressive given the performance that this thing puts out. I mean, if you can build a really tiny PC with a low or small form factor graphics card as well, then you could certainly cram a lot of power into a very tiny enclosure and it would look great sitting on your desk. As you know, Elden Ring is capped to 60 FPS by default and we've no trouble hitting it with this combination. The CPU once again at 5.15 GHz here, running at just 62 degrees this time around and consuming less than 50 watts of power most of the time. This really isn't all that intensive, especially with this cap in place, because we don't actually utilize much of our system in order to hit that frame rate limitation, even with these settings. Now Fortnite looks absolutely beautiful with the high settings and nanite and lumen plus the virtual shadows enabled. Our CPU once again hitting over 5 GHz within this build. The GPU being fully utilised here, the Ryzen 7 is certainly sitting back and relaxing in a lot of these games, proving that we could certainly use a more powerful GPU, that's for sure. I really do like this little board thus far. Once my concerns with the temperature were put at ease a little bit, I've had a great time using this, and the Noctua fan I'm using means that it doesn't really get all that loud either. I'd certainly recommend lower settings for Fortnite though, just because this is a competitive online game. Grand Theft Auto 5 is a lot older, of course, and easier to run, but once we really ramp up those advanced graphical settings and set everything in terms of the sliders up to their respective maximum, there can be instances where we do see a few dips and drops in the frame rate. Here though, everything seemed to be running just fine. Our CPU once again clocked at over 5 GHz, using less than 70 watts of power, around about 65 to 75 watts of power here. I've actually recently started a playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2 again from the beginning, trying to play it all in first person mode this time around, which is proving a bit more challenging. I switched to third person for the video footage here, but as you can see, with the ultra settings and everything else set to high, we're seeing well over 100 frames per second. I forget how capable the 3060 Ti is, and it's clear to see that the Ryzen 7 7745HX built into this Minisforum board is just chilling out, relaxing with this card. It's a nice combination, I feel, and one that runs a lot of games very well. Of course, we have the notoriously, let's say, temperamental Starfield. I never know how it's going to run on certain hardware. Here we're seeing at least 60 FPS. Once again, the Ryzen 7 is sitting back, relaxing a lot of the time, while our GPU is maxing out at almost 100% in these more intensive areas. The CPU temperature once again hitting above 80 degrees, but nothing too concerning here. The Last of Us Part 1 looks absolutely fantastic, and here it's running really nicely as well. The thing I like again about this board is that you can add more than one SSD if you like. There's plenty of ports on the board as well. We have HDMI display port, USB 3.2. But yeah, we also have the SSD fan as well that you saw at the start of the video. One thing we don't have is a traditional SATA connector on the motherboard. So those 2.5 inch drives we can't hook up to this thing, just NVMe drives. Just something definitely worth mentioning. Finally then we have the Witcher 3 with the RT preset. This definitely pushes things here. Our CPU still has more to give, as you can see in this crowded area here. The GPU hitting almost 100% utilization, but overall it's a very nice experience, and I've really enjoyed my time with the BD770i from Minisforum. It's probably one of my favourite products from them, but I'd say this appeals to a wider market than pre-built mini PCs would, simply because there is more opportunity for expansion in terms of adding your own GPU. Some mini PCs do support an eGPU, of course, but this just makes things all the more simple. Not to mention PCIe 5 support is there as well, and the Ryzen 7 is pretty powerful, so it can handle most cards that you throw at it. Thanks again to Minisforum. They're currently doing a sale as well, I think over the Christmas period. If you're watching this after January the 3rd, I think it is, then ignore this part. Christmas boxes are also available with certain purchases as well. That's where I got this charming little mouse pad, which is taking pride of place on my desk currently. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let me know what you think of this Minisforum mini motherboard with the built-in Ryzen 7 CPU in the comments, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.